that I was supposed to do. Mitzvot, I love to learn, daven, and yet I felt something was missing. And, I remember how I used to daven before I went to work. And then afterward, I didn't feel any real satisfaction. And, one day I realized that something was terribly wrong. If an Orthodox Jew with the best Jewish education, and my parents are here listening right now, they gave me an excellent Jewish education. And I grew up in a very joyous Jewish home. I loved learning Torah, but I wasn't feeling anything, and it didn't make sense. And I was asking myself, why am I doing all this for a feeling of, and something was out of alignment. I was spiritually thirsty and I wasn't sure what for, but I went looking, and I sought out teachers that could help me fill this void, and Baruch Hashem, I found them. And these teachers exposed me to texts and teachings I had never seen before, texts that connected the Torah to my life and my spiritual growth at that very moment. And that really, really spoke to me. And this is what I discovered years ago. I remember realizing it was for me like an aha moment. I discovered that the goal of my life was not to be a frum Jew. Rather, being a diligent, mitzvah observant Jew was the means to the ultimate goal of life of every Jew. And that is to have a dynamic, ever-developing personal relationship with Hashem, dvekut b'Hashem, cleaving to Hashem. I once heard Rav Moshe Weinberger, if you know him, he's the Rav of Eish Kodesh, and I once heard him share in an interview that Rav Avram Yitzchak Cohen Cook, maintained that the last generation before Mashiach comes, which really is us, will no longer be satisfied with knowing just the details, the ritual and the rote of Judaism. They won't be satisfied with just the trees, but they'll want to be able to see the forest, to understand the broader picture of how all the details of Torah Judaism, how they come together. For when a Jew gets a peek at the breathtaking panoramic view of what it means to be a Jew, she's very excited and she wants to have a part of it. And as I learned from a variety of inspirational texts that teach Pnimiyut Torah, the inner dimension of Torah, I got a glimpse of that breathtaking panoramic view of what it means to be a Jew and to develop a living, day-to-day, minute-to-minute relationship with Hashem. And my own spiritual life has been invigorated, it's been transformed. And my spiritual journey continues to this day. And I guess I just want to share the joy and chizuk that I've gained from that Torah learning. I want to share that with others. The Degel Machane Ephraim, the Baal Shem Tov's grandson, the 18th century, said that every generation's Torah scholars interpret the Torah according to what their generation needs. And I really think that more and more people today are thirsty for a living relationship with the Kadosh Baruch Hu. And I believe our generation needs greater exposure to these kinds of texts. The Yosher Divrei Emet, Rav Meshulam Feibush Heller of the 18th century, says the following, and I translate: every statement, every letter in our entire written and oral Torah has been written for no other purpose than to help us serve God. For this is why the Torah was given. And it's called the Torah because it is moreh. It teaches us the derech in which we need to follow. The Torah, we know, is not a history book. It's not there simply for our intellectual stimulation or curiosity, but rather through every word of the Torah, Hashem teaches us how to live a life of connection to Him. So in this class, we will be delving into Chasidic and other emuni-related teachings connected to the Parsha, which I do hope will inspire us and encourage us to grow in our own Avodat Hashem. A primary text for our learning will be the Netivot Shalom. This is a text that is very dear to my heart. Here I have show you the book, the Netivot Shalom. This is a text that when I started learning it 20 years ago, it spoke to me and really is a major influence in my spiritual life. The Netivot Shalom, the Slonim Rebbe, Rav Shalom Noach Berezovsky, was a Hasidic Rebbe of today. He was born in Belarus. He moved to Israel in the 1930s, and he died in the year 2000. The Slonimer single-handedly rebuilt Slonimer Chasidut after the war. Most of Slonimer Hasidim were wiped out in the Shoah. And hopefully, you will see that his teachings blend the warmth of the Hasidic approach with the sharp clarity of the Lithuanian yeshiva. He learned in both milieus. He was a Rebbe, modern-day Rebbe, who responded to the challenges of modern life. And his Torah provides inspiration and solace and chizuk and guidance for the spiritual struggles that he saw and that we see in the Jewish community today. Things like doubt, spiritual estrangement, wrestling with base desires and temptations, serial failure, etc., as we will see. And he explains, the Slonimer Rebbe, the Netivot Shalom, explains that the goal of his book is to, quote, to learn the hidden from the revealed, to find within the wisdom and mysteries of the biblical text the answers and moral principles related to our Avodat Hashem that we can use to enhance our Avodat Hashem. So with that in mind, we'll begin to learn. And as Melissa already said, I do encourage participation, being that we're dealing with things that relate to our Avodat Hashem and our own personal lives and spiritual lives. Certainly, I encourage free association if you have a thought, an insight, something you'd like to share. Also, questions. I can't promise answers, but questions are always important. And they welcome feedback. So let us get started. Any questions so far? Okay, then. Here we go. Okay. Beseder Gamor. And okay, here we go. Now the Slonimer Rebbe usually, we're in Parshat Noach, as everybody knows. Sorry about that. The Slonimer Rebbe usually often will focus on a specific pasuk or a section of psukim, and he'll delve deeply into their message. But today we're going to deal with broader questions coming out of our Parsha. And let us begin. I'm going to read the text here. Don't worry, I will explain it. Parshiot HaChatayim HaRishonim, the first sins of human history. And the Slonimer says here, Breshit HaTorah HaKdosha, Ktuvim Kama Parshiot Shel HaChatayim HaKadmonim, Chet Etz Hadat V'Chet O Shel Kain, Dor HaMabul V'Dor HaAflaga. Right, so at the beginning of the Torah, the very beginning, the first parshiot of the Torah, it's all about Chata'im, right? The sin of Adam and Chava in Gan Eden, the sin of Cain, the sin of the generation of the flood, and also the sin of the Tower of Babel. And we're going to talk about what those are. V'tzarich biur, l'shem ma nichtav kol zot b'Torah, shenitna, rak lelamed orchot chaim. This is such a classic question of the Slonimer. Why were these written in the Torah? Why? The Torah was given to us to teach us orchot chaim, how to live, how to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu, l'lamed le'yudi et taryag ha'mitzvot, v'darkei avodat Hashem, to teach us mitzvahs, to teach us how to serve Hashem, to walk in the way of Hashem. Umanu lomdim parshiot elu. What did these parshiot teach us? Okay, it's a question that, we have to ask about everything. But we don't, usually we say, okay, so it's in the Torah, so we have to learn it. But this question of why is it even there? What are these stories, these narratives? What are their roles in the Torah? Right? V'im chet etz hadat nogeh l'klalut Yisrael v'klalut habriya, shekol habriya metzapeh letikun hapagam hazeh, umuvan madua nichtav b'Torah. So what he's saying here is, okay, so let's take the chet etz hadat. right? The sin of the tree of knowledge, Adam and Chava. So that's a chet that has to do with all of creation. It was at the very beginning of creation, right? It's a sin that affected all of humanity. We know that eating from the tree, Ra, evil, entered the world. The Yetzer Hara entered us. Hashem's presence became more hidden. And Jewish history and world history is all about rectifying that sin of trying to return to Gan Eden, bringing the Mashiach and the Geula, when everything will once again be unified with the will of God, right? L'taken olam b'malchut Shaddai, right? To rectify the world and declare Hashem king. So that's Eitz Hadat. Okay, so that we need, right? That's what he's saying, that we need. We need to know this. It's crucial. But why do we need to know about the sin of Cain and Abel? And why do we need to know? He says here about the inyan of Chet Dor Mabul, the generation of the flood. You would think that really just had to do with that generation alone, right? They were corrupt. They were depraved, and God needed to destroy the world and do a restart. Okay, that had to do with them. Ki'ilu, that had to do with them, right? What does it have to do with us? And also, what does it teach us? And also, tzarich biur b'chet dor haflaga. Also, the Tower of Babel. What does that teach us? Why do we need to know this? Okay, so I'm going to put the question in this way. If the mission of this world is rectifying the sin of Adam and Chava, why couldn't we just go from the story of Adam and Chava straight to the story of Lech Lecha to Avram Avinu? Avram Avinu begins, as we'll see, Olam HaTikun. He begins to bring the light into the world, begins the Tikun, the fixing, the reparation of the world. Why couldn't we go straight to there? What do we need these stories for? And this is reminiscent of Rashi's question at the beginning of the Torah, when he asks on the first pasuk in Breshit, why do we start with Sefer Breshit? Why don't we just start with HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem? Why don't we start with the mitzvot of the Torah? What do we need all of Sefer Breshit for? And of course, he gives the answer. So that's the kind of question we have here. Why these narratives? These narratives about these three sins. Okay? So let us continue and answer the question. Okay, so there's really two questions he's asking here. First of all, what is the role of these three narratives in the Torah? And secondly, the question will be, what do we learn from each one of those narratives or each one of those sins in the narrative? And let us continue. V'yesh lomar ha'inyan dehine shlosha chata'im elu hayu kodem lahofa'at olam hatikun ha'or hagadol shel Avram Avinu. Right? So here he says that these three sins, again, we're going to talk about them more in depth, but the sin of Cain and Hevel, the sin of the generation of the flood, and the sin of the generation of Tower of Babel, they all appeared in the world before the Tikkun Ha'or Gadol Shel Avram Avinu, before Avram Avinu. Right? Avram Avinu, again, was the first Jew, the first one to recognize the Kadosh Baruch Hu and everything. He was the beginning of bringing the light of a Kadosh Baruch Hu back into the world, what's called Olam HaTikun, when we start moving toward L'taken Olam b'malchut Shaddai, right, bringing the world back to a full recognition of a Kadosh Baruch Hu, right? Shebebet alafim harishonim shel habriya hayu kol hazman chataim, the first 2,000 years of the world, right? Think about it, right? Hashem creates the world, right? And he sees that everything he created is tov me'od. And next thing you know, we have several narratives all about chataim, right? It's sort of, if the world is tov me'od, what's with all these chataim, all these sins, right? And so he says here that the first 2,000 years are full of sins, right? Avram came on the scene in the year 1812 BCE. So how do we understand this? Why? What's this all about? That first we have a whole period of sinning, and then, only then, appears Avram Avinu. V'biur bazeh. And now he's going to explain something fundamental. And I would say that if we take home this one point, it will all be worth it. V'biur bazeh ki ken yasar HaKadosh Baruch Hu et kol seder habriya be'ofen shel chashucha v'hadar nehora. this is a fundamental template for creation. Hashem created the world in such a way that the order of creation is such that first you have chashucha, v'hadar, nehora, right? First there is, you have to have darkness before there is light. Vayi erev, vayi boker. Think about how God created the world. Vayi erev, vayi boker. First there was erev, then there was boker, then there was morning. Mikodem hachoshech, v'achar kach, mitoch hachoshech, bokea haor. Right? First there's darkness, and from the darkness, light emerges. Val derech klipa kadma lapri, in the same way that a klipa covering precedes the pri. This is a Kabbalistic idea or teaching of the covering. The covering covers the pri, right? Immediately what comes to mind is something like an orange where the outside, right, covers it and it's garbage. It's not something that we can really eat or that we need, but it covers the pri, and only when you peel it off, you come to the fruit. Okay, without going deeply into this Kabbalistic idea right now, I think we're getting the idea. Okay, Hashem created the world in such a way that darkness preceded light, or in the words of the Maharal, ha'eder kodem lahavaya. Right? Before there can be an existence, there must be a void. Okay? And we'll talk about this more in a sec. But al derech zeh gam b'klalut, v'chein ba'avodat Hashem, I'm sorry. V'chein ba'avodat Hashem, haderech hi mikodem sur meira v'achar kach aseh tov. Also in avodat Hashem, first, right? What is the order of avodat Hashem? First, sur meira. We must go away, we must flee from Ra, and only afterward can we do Tov. In other words, if we're steeped in Chataim and Averot, right, then we can't grow, we can't move forward. We need to separate ourselves from evil, and then we can do good. And what comes to mind for me here is the example of, let's say, someone who, lo aleinu, is addicted to, let's say, drugs, right? How do they go on with their life? First, you have to go into detox. You have to disconnect from that addiction, from that world of drugs, and only then you can move forward, right? I hope you're getting the idea here. Ba'al derech zeh gam b'klalut ha'olam. Okay, and also with regard to the world, okay? שעולם התיקון התחיל מאברהם אבינו, שתיקן את העולם במידת החסד שלו. All right, I want to stop for 1 second because I want to drive this point home a little bit further, okay? It's such an important understanding for us that God created the world in such a way that darkness precedes light. And again, remember when God created the world, right? Va'aretz hayta tohu vavohu v'choshech al pnei tehom. It was tohu vavohu. It was chaos. Choshech al pnei tehom. It was darkness. Vayomer Elohim yihi or vayhi or. And Hashem said, "Let there be light," and there was light. Okay, this is the way the world is, and I just think it's so cool because I think we can see examples of that in our life at every level. And I ask you right now, if anybody wants to unmute themselves, what kinds of things come to mind? This understanding that the Seder of the world is first darkness and only afterward light, right? First the void and only afterward existence or growth. Can you think of examples of that in our own life? Anybody want to unmute themselves? Anybody have any ideas about that? Okay. Anybody? Who's that?
Okay, Cheryl. Hi, Dodi.
Hey, Cheryl. Okay, what do you got?
I think that this is our history throughout time, that unfortunately, Bnei Israel needs to go through some kind of, I don't know how to call it, difficult time, etgar, something, and only afterwards, like Medinat Israel, for example. Everything, every bit of the way, unfortunately, that's just the way. We have to go through some kind of darkness until we see the light.
Thank you. Absolutely, 100%. Right? Jewish history is darkness to light, galut, right? In general, overall, we're moving from a state of galut to a state of geulah, right? More specifically, different periods in history, right? That absolutely, Cheryl, 100%. Who else can share? Melissa, you have something to add?
First of all, there's somebody posted in the chat. I don't know if you see the chats.
I don't see the chat right now. Yes.
So someone named Adina wrote that a womb, a baby comes from darkness into light to be born.
Yay, yay, beautiful. Right. Think about it. So this applies to all different levels of life. A womb, a baby is first, in this covering, right, inside this dark womb, and then the baby is born. Beautiful. It has to go through that period of darkness in order for it to emerge and be born into the great light. Thank you so much. I'll give, anybody else have any other examples?
My name is Linda.
Hi, Linda.
Glenda,
hi.
Hi. The skies become dark before we have the bracha of rain.
Beautiful. Fantastic. Who else? I'm telling you, we can sit here for an hour and we can think of it. This is like a fundamental understanding of the way the world works. Anybody else?
I think the main thing is the appreciation that is engendered, black to white, dark to light. Makes it more intense for the person who ends up there. Beautiful.
That's right. Because we have the darkness, right? We appreciate the light. Absolutely. 100%. That is definitely fundamentally part of the way HaKadosh Baruch Hu set up the world. I'm going to throw out a few more examples so we can move on. A seed in the ground, right? How do you plant a seed? How do you get a plant to grow? You have to bury that seed in the ground. In darkness, it's in a cover, right? Growth from crisis in general, or when we learn something new, we're in the dark, and then we learn, we work, and eventually we come to clarity. Right? Child development, right? A child, we're told both, listen, we can talk about it both psychologically, but also on a spiritual level. A child is born with the Yetzer Hara, but Chazal teaches that the Yetzer HaTov is developed, that only emerges bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah age, right? And like Cheryl said, right, Jewish history, right? Slavery in Egypt led to Yetziat Mitzrayim, all the miracles and the receiving of the Torah. Right? So all of this is really, he's teaching us something fundamental about life. I even thought to myself, even our hair goes from dark to light, right? So anyway, but creation is always moving from less to more, from Adair, a void, to Shefa, to God's plenty, right? Anything holy must be preceded by darkness. So now, let us continue. This is very, very, it's a very important thing for us to understand. And then he says here, Avram Avinu, שתיקן את העולם במידת החסד שלו, ואחר כך תיקן יצחק במידת הגבורה, ויעקב במידת התפארת, והיית בזוהר הקדוש שגימל עמודי עולם אלו הם כנגד גימל העמודים שהעולם עומד עליהם, על התורה ועל עבודה ועל גמילות חסדים. Okay, so what happened was we had this dark period of Chataim, and then Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov come on the scene, and they begin Olam HaTikun, they begin the rectification, the fixing of this world, bringing the light into this world. Avram through Chesed, Yitzchak through Gvura, Yaakov through Tiferet, and the Zohar HaKadosh parallels them with the famous Mishnah in Pirkei Avot, Al Shlosha Dvarim Haolam Omed, Al Torah V'al Avodah V'al Gemilut Chasadim. The world stands on three things: Torah, Avodah, service of Hashem, and Gemilut Chasadim, right? And Chesed, and that is it aligns with Avraham is Gemilut Chasadim, Yitzchak is Avodah, right? Korbanot, service of God. Yitzchak gave himself as a korban in the Akedah, and Yaakov is Torah. Okay, and all of this is to say at the very bottom of this slide, v'kodem shehitchil olam hatikun, hayu shlosha chataim anizkarim b'bchinat chashucha v'hadar nahora. Right? So before the olam hatikun came about through Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, leading ultimately to the Jewish people, right? And we continue, that is our role, to bring this world to a state of tikkun, right? To reveal God in the world, right? We had to have that choshech, that darkness of that void of sin. And Hashem has created this hiddenness, this darkness, this void in order to leave a space for us to act upon reality, to cry, Elokim, Yehi, or God, let there be light. And this is where our free choice comes in, right? What do we do with the darkness, with the void? Abraham was the first one to act to fill this void, to infuse the darkness with godly light. And that was his role. His role was to show the world that from the darkness, you can bring light. And I just want to say, in terms of our own lives, the more we understand the way the world works, the more we understand this fundamental principle of creation, the less we need to despair or fear the darkness in our own lives. It's comforting, in a sense, to know that we have to go through darkness. That's taken very broadly here, but we have to go through darkness, through lack, through struggle in our own lives, downs, in order to grow. Because we can, and this is really teaching us also that we can be sure that if we are experiencing darkness in our lives, if we are struggling in our lives, it's meant to lead to great light. This reminds me of the Eish Kodesh, the Piazetzner Rav, who I hope we'll learn some of his teachings this year. He was a rabbi, a Hasidic rabbi who was in the Warsaw Ghetto with his Hasidim, and he wrote the Eish Kodesh, amongst other books, but the Eish Kodesh he wrote in the Warsaw Ghetto, where he gave drashot and chizuk to his followers, to his Hasidim in the Warsaw Ghetto. And he was incredible. This was a man who knew he was steeped in darkness. And yet when you read his teachings, he's always talking about how there's going to be a light that comes from this, right? He's never b'yeush. He doesn't know what that light will be exactly, but he knows that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to bring tremendous light. And I would add that, Corona is right here in our face, and that's the whole reason we're even learning here on Zoom. But I think this goes for Corona as well. Corona, we can say, in a sense, is a time of darkness, a time of tumult. It's we don't know. We're in the dark. We don't know exactly what's going on. But what this means is that Corona is an opening that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is giving us to act like Avram Avinu, to begin tikkun in our own lives, tikkun as a society. And we need to be assured that no matter how hard Corona is, it is going to lead to a great light. So that's this is his answer, the Slonim, the Netivot Shalom's answer to the first question of what is the role of these stories? Why are they here at this point in the Torah? And here he says, Chashuvcha v'hadar nahora. This is the choshech. This is the darkness, the sinfulness, the corruption from which the olam hatikun, the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is going to emerge. Is there any questions on this before I continue? Okay, then we'll go on. Okay, so that's the answer to the first question. And now the question is, what are we meant to learn from these three sins? Let's move it up. Okay, now we're going to get specifically into these three sins of these three stories, okay? V'inyan shlosha chatayim elu hu k'ma'amar chazal hakina hatava v'akavod motzi'in et ha'adam min ha'olam. Okay, first of all, in talking about the stories, what were the sins of these narratives? Cain and Hevel was, anybody want to say it? What was Cain and Hevel? Can I unmute yourself? Jealousy, right? That Cain was jealous, that Hevel's offering was accepted by God, and his was not. And we know the whole story where he gets angry and ashamed, and God tries to lift him up and guide him, but in the end he winds up killing his brother because of his jealousy. Excellent. And what about the Dor HaMabul? What was their sin? And looking at the screen helps this, no doubt. Okay, so that we know that was corruption, that was sexual corruption, right? The entire universe had been corrupted. And here, we can call that ta'ava. We're going to talk more about it. Ta'ava, lustfulness. That kavod, right? Kavod, that was the Tower of Babel. And we'll talk about that as well, that they built the tower in order to make a name for themselves. So first of all,
Did you say kavod or lack of
kavod?
kavod?
Kavod. In other words, seeking kavod. Seeking honor. Kavod.
Seeking honor,
Yes.
kavod?
Correct. That's correct. Okay, we're going to talk more about this. But here is a famous statement of Chazal, that kina, jealousy and lust, taiva, right? Lust and seeking honor removes a person from this world. ששלושה פגמים אלו הם הפגמים הגרועים ביותר שאין העולם יכול לסבול אותם והם מוציאים את האדם מן העולם. Right? Because these three defects, all right, they're spiritual defects. They are the worst in the world. The world can't suffer these things. And therefore, the words of the Chazal are motzi'in et ha'adam min ha'olam. These three things, right? Kina, tava, and kavod, remove a person from this world. And before we go into the specific sins, I just want to ask what this means to you, right? Think about it. I mean, I think we can start to think about the inyanim of jealousy and lustfulness and seeking honor in our world today. And the statement is that they remove a person from this world. I want to ask what this means to you, that these three pgamim, these three defects, remove a person from the world. What do you think that means? Free associate.
But they're not. I could find you tons of instances of all of these things now.
Okay.
And I don't see anybody being removed.
Okay.
What I think it refers to, if I may, is that the person is not interrelating, okay, is not performing, for example, mitzvot ben adam l'chaveiro, as should be with the rest of the people in the world. And I think that you can translate it as well, that perhaps the punishment is something like Gehenna, where HaKadosh Baruch Hu will actually extract you from the rest of Klal Yisrael because you are not behaving correctly and you are not emulating the Kedusha that we're instructed with Kedoshim to you.
Okay. Yofi, thank you. Thank you. And Cheryl, so what you are saying is connected to what I had in mind here, because I think we do think of Motzin Adam Min Ha'olam, we can definitely understand removing a person from the world as physical, right? And the fact is that in the stories of that we're talking about here, in the narratives, that's pretty much what happened. Either, right, in terms of ta'ava, right, in terms of the generation of the flood, so they were destroyed. Motzi'im et Adam Min Ha'olam. It takes a person out of this world. You can't live in this world if you have such corruption, such depravity, right? Kin'ah, so Cain, he was not killed, but he was banished, right? He had to wander. His punishment was wandering around the world without a set place. And the Tower of Babel, they were building a tower in order to make for them a name. What happened there? Hashem scattered them about, right? Spreading out. So I guess the point I want to make here, and Cheryl definitely related to that, was that Motzi'in et Adam Me'olam, I think it removes, these three things remove a person from the world. I don't know that we have to, I think that we can understand it very broadly. It removes a person when you are a jealous person, when you are a gluttonous or a lustful person, when you're seeking kavod, when you're haughty, when you're arrogant, all of those things removes you from this world on a variety of levels. Of course, there's the physical level. There's some people that die, right? We're going to talk about this in a minute. We're going to go into detail. But being put out of the world can also, it can be physical. It can be interpersonal, as Cheryl was relating to, right? People don't want to be with you, right? Or you lose relationships or you wreck relationships. It can be psychological. Some people really become, distorted in their perception of life, even, psychosis at the extreme, right? Socially, intellectually. In a word, when you are jealous, when you are lustful, when you are seeking kavod, it's not a life. It's not a life, right? It removes motziim et ha'adam min ha'olam. It's no life. It sucks the life out of you. And now he goes into each of the different sins here. Okay, so let's see the first one here. V'harishon, we're in the middle. V'harishon hu kinah. Kinah, that was the sin of Cain. Kaman dechtiv v'rakav atzamot kinah, right? A pasuk from Mishlei. Chaye b'sarim lev marpeh u'rakav atzamot kinah, which means a calm disposition gives bodily health. Jealousy is rot to the bones. This is Mishlei. Shlomo HaMelech is telling us when you're jealous, it rots our bones. V'zeh haya shoresh hachet shel Kain she'itchil mikina. Right, the root of the chet, the sin of Cain, was jealousy. Al kach she'akadosh baruch hu kibel. Right, we know because he was accepting. God accepted Hevel's mincha, his offering, and not Cain. Umikinah. And from jealousy, he gia ad lachet kazeh laharog et achav shu chamur biyoter b'Torah. You know what jealousy led to? We know what it led to. It led to Cain killing his brother, which is the worst possible chet in all of Torah. Right? Someone who kills is deserving of being killed themselves. Right? He killed another human being. Jealousy led to that. The lachein, and therefore the Shlomo says, Katva Torah chet zeh lelamed ad hechan hadvarim magiim. Right? So the Torah teaches us, brings us this chet to teach us how far jealousy can take you, how far things can go. Le'ezo darga shfela v'yeruda yichola hakina lavi et ha'adam. To what extent, what low place jealousy can bring a person. We need to know this. We need to know this. Cain immediately triggered within him was jealousy toward his brother. And that tells us that this is a natural human instinct. It's part of our human nature that we must rise above. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu, right at the beginning of the Torah, is telling us, look where Kina can lead you. So we really have to be careful. And I just want to add here a quote from Dr. Jane Fleming, a London-based doctor, who says, just so we understand, jealousy is a complex emotional mix of fear, stress, and anger. These three states trigger the fight or flight response, usually in quite an intense way. Someone in the grip of jealousy will suffer raised blood pressure, heart rate, and adrenaline levels, weakened immunity, anxiety, and probably insomnia. And we've seen in our own lives, we've seen so many, all you have to do is go online to see. Jealousy can, just like Cain, can lead to murder. I think one of the most famous ones is O.J. Simpson. It is no life. Kin'ah is no life. Hashem wanted to teach us how far jealousy can go and how much destruction jealousy brings to the world. And the next one, Chet Dor HaMabul Inyano Ta'ava. Ki hishchit kol basar darko al haaretz. Right, the chet of the Dor HaMabul, the generation of the Mabul, was ta'ava, was lust. They were completely corrupt. Everything, all of creation, right, all basar, all created things were completely made corrupt by this behavior. And he explained, Kamamar Maran Baal Beis Abraham, שתחילת הבדם הייתה מסתכלויות אסורות ויראו בני אלוקים את בנות האדם, ומזה הגיעו למצב נורא כזה שכמו לא ניטב כמו לא יהיה עוד. All right, so what does he say here? He said, you know how it started? You know how the lust began? It began with histakluyot asurot, which means looking at things that we are forbidden to look at. And that's in the psukim. You don't have it before you, but preceding the story, the narrative, the Noach narrative, we have Vayhi ki echel adam larov al pnei adama Ubanot yeldu lahem, vayiru b'nei Elohim et bnot Adam ki tovatena vayikchu lahem nashim mikol asher bacharu. And it came to pass when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born to them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were fair, and they took them, whomever they chose. Right? Through the seeing, the men saw the women, and then they took. The words in the Torah are vayikchu lahem nashim mikol asher bacharu. They took women, they took wives, anything that they wanted, they took. Okay? It began with histakluyot asurot, looking at things that we are forbidden to look at. And that's what ultimately led to the state of affairs that was so absolutely corrupt, tremendous tum'ah that flooded creation to the extent that there was no rectification for it. And Hashem had to bring a mabul, and that mabul had to destroy all of creation, right? Shagam, I'm in the middle here, Shagam heim chatu, lamrot she'ein lahem yetzer hara, right? Even animals, creatures were all involved in this corruption. That's how corrupt everything became. And he goes on in a description of the corruption. And it all came from histakluyot asurot, watching things, seeing things that we are forbidden to see. And that's why he says, L'shem kach katva Torah Parshat zo lelamdenu ad heichana davrim magim. Again, he brought this narrative, the whole narrative of the Mabul, one of the reasons, to show us how far things can go, how ta'ava, how lustfulness takes a world, removes a person from this world, and how much we have to be careful of looking at things that are forbidden to look at, and of becoming lustful. And, in thinking about this as well, right? And again, lust, what is lust? It's intense or unbridled sexual desire, or to have an intense desire or need or a craving for something that you don't need, you already have, right? Gluttony is in that category. And, just think about this, right? At the very beginning of the Torah, Hashem is showing us what? Watching things that we should not, seeing things that we should not see, the effect that can cause, how low we can fall. Ladies and gentlemen, I think we can agree, we see this today in our lives as well. Our culture is a watching culture, right? People are always talking about, did you watch this? Did you watch this? Kids want to watch. I want to watch. We're going to watch, right? We are a watching culture. His staklut has never been, and now certainly with the internet and social media, his staklut. So all we're doing is looking, right? And I just want to share from our own lives today, right? Research that is not a surprise to us, and we know about it, right? For example, a study reported in Psychology Today that followed 707 children over a 17-year period, and they found that early TV viewing is strongly linked to later aggressive behavior, right? Even when other contributing factors such as parental neglect, neighborhood violence, and parental income were taken into consideration. So even no matter what was going on in the kid's life, early TV viewing is strongly linked with later aggressive behavior. Similar studies also found a link between watching sexual content on television and later sexual acting out behavior. I mean, there are plenty of studies that show the damage then can come from histakluyot asurot. A recent study of women between the ages of 18 and 25 showed a link between Instagram and increased self-objectification and body image concerns, right? Especially among those who frequently viewed fitspiration images. I never heard these words before, fitspiration, right? I guess these are images of people who are fit, women who are fit, that are supposed to inspire you to become fit. Americans, it's found, spend around 2 hours a day on social media, potentially exposed to unrealistic ideals of beauty, diet talk, body shaming, thinspiration, another new word that I learned, right? I guess images of thin people that's supposed to inspire you to want to be thin, weight loss posts, and more, right? When we look at things, where it can lead to. And at the extreme, of course, as we know, right? In terms of lust, right? Madoff, Epstein, Jeffrey Epstein, you know, we don't even want to, you can't even talk about that. It's so horrible. Addictions, shopping addictions, gambling addictions, obsessions. And I've shared this in another shiur that I recently saw that in the Yeshiva World News, there is actually a banner right there on the front about, for an organization called Guard Your Eyes, because countless Jews are looking for an exit from inappropriate online content, but they're trapped. Literally helping so many people, so many from Jews who are engaged in histakluyot asurot and lust, right? And it's a very, again, if this is the beginning of the Torah, then this is something also, the potential within us is there. It's part of our nature. And Hashem is here warning us, as he did with Cain, warning us to control and the Mabul, to control it, to be aware of it so that we can channel it. He wanted us to see how inappropriate looking and lust can lead to destruction in the world. And hold on one second, I just have to plug in my computer here. Let's see, we're learning a lot. It's like it's gonna power here. Okay, we're good. And now we come to the Tower of Babel. Okay, the third sin. V'achar kach ne'emar chetz dor haflaga hatofes gam ken makom nirchav b'Torah. Right now, after that, the sin of the dor haflaga, right, the Tower of Babel, as you see here, which takes up, he says, makom nirchav b'Torah. It actually, right, it's a story that goes on at length. It's not one pasuk. It's a story that goes on at length. Again, if it's there, written there, then it's all there for us to learn from. And the pagam, the defect there was geut v'kavod, seeking honor, pride, haughtiness, right? This is from the pasuk that, the statement that they make when they're building the tower, or the reason for building the tower, right? Hava nivne lanu iru migdal v'rosho b'shamayim v'naseh lanu shem. Let's build a city and a tower where its head reaches the sky, v'naseh lanu shem, and we will make for ourselves a great name. This is the klipa, right? This is the tuma. This is the darkness of haughtiness, arrogance, seeking honor, and pride. Right? So Hashem, actually, before we read this, I want to share with you also, you know, and I can ask you, if anybody, what is it like to be around a haughty person? What is it like? Is it fun? Is it easy?
Unpleasant.
Unpleasant, right? It's really unpleasant. Remember, Kina, Tava v'kavod motziim et ha'adam min ha'olam. It's very hard to be in a world with this kind of a person, in a social world, certainly, with this kind of a person. And I'll bring you a quote again from Psychology Today that describes, I think, what Abby just said, the unpleasantness. It says, quote, "We've all been repelled by people who have an inflated view of themselves. They may talk about themselves excessively and rarely show interest in others. They pump themselves up and come across as snooty, exuding an attitude that makes others feel judged. Such overconfidence and arrogance push us away," right? They display superiority, obnoxious superiority. We feel small, right?
It
studies.
also brings,
Go ahead.
I think it also brings out the worst in us. You know, that when I hear somebody, you know, acting the way you're saying, it's like you want to say something back. You want to, you know, counter, and you have to really make an effort to control yourself and, you know, not feed into it and not lower yourself.
That is such a beautiful ha'ara. Beautiful, beautiful. Right. So that creates more, right, more negativity. Exactly. It triggers the Yetzer Hara with in us, and that can just lead. And, so mutzin adam min ha'olam, you can apply it to there as well, right? That there's a domino effect there. The toxicity of being around that person can lead to more and more toxicity. Thank you. A very, very important ha'ara. And studies have found correlations between narcissism, if we sort of group that in, narcissism and cardiac issues. And so he concludes here again that Hashem wrote this. God also brought this narrative, taught us this narrative in order to teach us that, again, I think pride is something that is an innate kind of yetzer within us. And he wants to show us how far things can lead. When you are seeking honor, when you're seeking pride, when you're arrogant, there was no fixing this pagam, this defect in the Dor HaFlaga, right, the Tower of Babel. And so Hashem had to scatter them across the land. They couldn't stay together. It's actually beautiful, I think, if that was Abby, because I don't see all the pages. If that's what you said, then it's actually right on with what the Torah is saying, because Vayifetz Hashem otam misham al pnei kol haaretz. They couldn't be together anymore, right? It was Hashem had to separate them, because if they would have stayed together, it would have just led to perhaps what you described. So shkoya, very, 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 very relevant. Nimtza, yes, someone make a comment.
So we're looking into this, and everything you said is beautiful and great, but we're looking in this, and these are lessons that Hashem wanted to teach us. But how do the people of those generations, what Torah do they have? What instruction do they have? What laws do they have to keep them from doing these Tahava and Kavod and Sinah? We're looking back into this.
That's correct. That's correct. What did they have? It's an excellent question. Like I said at the beginning, I can't promise to answer all questions. It's a very big question. For example, if we go to Noach, they saw Noach building an ark. They could have inquired. Hopefully that would have influenced them, right? There are all sorts of discussions about whether, that Noach really didn't go out and try to be Makarev, the people around him. Cain and Hevel. Cain was jealous of his brother. He was upset. Hashem comes and speaks to him. He said, Im tetiv se'et, ve'im lo tetiv lepetach chatat robetz. Hashem comes and said, why are you sad? Why are you upset? Right? He tries to guide Cain, not to sink further, but the lehetiv and all that means, we're not going to go into that now. So God was there as well. Right, the Tower of Babel, so I can't speak to that right now. I don't have the entire piece with me here. It's an excellent question, and I can't fully answer it. But I will say that just for our purposes in here, what we're doing, you're right, we're learning it for us here. It's something that I'll definitely think about more. I think... Yes.
I thank you. You're correct in everything that you're answering, unless this is just the beginning of the Torah that we're going to get into when you spoke before about Abraham and how we're going to develop. And these are just, it really doesn't matter what the situation was, and it's how we're supposed to learn from it. But thank you.
Yes, thank you. For our purposes, yes, I would say that it doesn't matter. For our purposes right now, today, what does it teach us? What can we learn from it? And here he sums up, Nimtza she'atorah kedosha achen melamedet lanu b'parshiot elu orchot chaim. In fact, he says these narratives do teach us how to live. Lema alula kina lavi, right? What all these three sins can lead to. Ve'achar kach, and here's what whoever just spoke, I'm sorry, I don't see you, your names, but achar kach, Matchil Gilui Ha'or Shel Avram Avinu Ba'olam HaTikun. And after these narratives, these sins, begins the light of Avram Avinu. He begins the Olam HaTikun Sheitchil MeAvram Yitzchak VeYaakov. Right? They begin a movement upward. Right? They begin to bring the light into the world, to fix the world, to rectify the darkness, the sins that were in the world until that point. Shehem Torah, Avodah, Gemilut Chasadim, Shosha Amudim. Right? They are the three pillars on which the world stands. Torah, Avodah, Gemilut Chasadim. Benigud, in contrast to the three sins, Haniskar Motzim et Adam min haolam. Right? So understand this connection here. Right? Kina, Ta'ava, and Kavod removes a person from this world. Al Shlosha Dvarim haolam hamed, on three pillars the world stands, Al HaTorah, Al Avodah, Al Gemilut Chasadim, right, which the Zohar again, right, aligns with Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, Chesed, Gvura, Tiferet, Torah, service of God, and loving kindness, right? They are the tikkun. Those three things are the tikkun for Kina, Ta'ava, and Kavod. Okay, yes, someone have a question?
Okay,
Yes.
about the lust. Question comes to my mind: how far should you go with this? For example, the situations we have today in the society where buses are separated, or not allowing any women to be on posters or in advertisement, or the Arabs who are covering entirely their face. There's no end where you can go with this. Where is the limit? Where?
And then, again, another tremendous question that I'm not about to answer, but I think what you're describing is all of us, all these different groups struggling with this issue, struggling with the issue of, histaklut, right? Histakluyot asurot, and not allowing ourselves to come to a place where we come to lust, and which leads to destruction, right? I think different groups have their different ideas about what that should be and how that should be. And it's an excellent question. And I'm not going to discuss my own personal opinions right now, but it is truly an excellent question. I want to sum this part up because we only have about 10 more minutes, and say that spiritually, all these midot, kina, tava, and kavod, in these defects are defects because we put ourselves and our own desires in the center instead of Hashem, instead of the will of God. It's the opposite of ubacharta b'chaim, that Hashem tells us we must choose life. All these midot lead to destruction, separation, spiritual and physical illness, and even death. They are defects that are the opposite, as we've said, of litaken olam b'malchut Shaddai. And I would suggest that they come at the beginning of human history to teach us that as human beings, we all have the potential for these defects. Our Yetzer Hara in these departments is very strong. And I'd like everybody to think about when you've ever felt jealous, or you wanted something, you needed something that you really didn't need, or you were seeking kavod. And I know I personally struggle with these things at different times in my own life. Our Yetzer Haras are very strong. And it's why we see so much of these three defects in our history and even today. And, I'll just, a little parentheses, in Corona time, perhaps this Yetzer is expressed by not following the Hanchayot, right? Not following the directives, not wearing masks, which we know can lead to destruction, God forbid, and death. Motzi'im et Adam min haolam, right? When we put ourselves in the center and not Hashem. Okay, I want to share with you, are there any questions before we go to the last part of this year? Any questions, anything that needs clarification right now? The big questions, I don't know that I can answer, but anything about what I've said so far that is, or any thoughts or free associations, that's also welcome. Something that it makes you think of.
I had thoughts along the way.
Okay.
If a Kadosh Baruch Hu, when he created the world, it was for good, all right? And then all these bad things happened. Now, did he know ahead of time that these bad things were going to happen? And if so, he had to have these chetim, because Adam and Eve didn't know what sin was, and Cain didn't know what murder was. And so the people of Bavel, maybe they weren't aware either of their feelings, but God had these things written in for us before Avram Avinu in order to teach us how to better lead our lives.
Yes, that is definitely true. That is 100%, 100%. Right? I think, yes.
I want to ask you about self-righteousness or righteousness. Where's the line between righteousness and self-righteousness, and guiding our young who are, as you said, emerging from dark into lightness?
Guiding our what? Our
young, our youth.
Our youth.
Yeah, right. Who themselves are emerging from darkness into light. So how does righteousness become arrogance? And yeah, I would like your thoughts.
You would like my thoughts? Whoa. Okay. I'm going to make one statement about that. I won't be able, I know we have to end by 10:10. I appreciate the question. These are also, I mean, that's the thing, like learning these Torot of the Slonim certainly brings out real important fundamental questions about living and about life. And in an hour, it's so hard to really answer them. So I'm going to answer just with one statement, and then I just want to bring to end off with another beautiful idea of the Slonim, and that is that we always have to ask ourselves in anything that we do, and in our thoughts, in anything in our lives, what does HaKadosh Baruch Hu want from me right now? What is the will of Hashem right now? Not what do I want right now. I mean, we do have wants, and we can want, and we need to want. We need to listen to our neshama. We're all individuals, and our neshama and who we are pulls us in different directions. But it's always, we need to always, everything that we do needs to go through the glasses or the filter of what will be tov be'enei Hashem. How do I align my will with HaKadosh Baruch Hu's will? So in terms of righteousness and self-righteousness and all those things, why am I doing what I'm doing? You know, who's the center here? Is it me, or is it the will of HaKadosh Baruch Hu? That's a constant, and that's the work of our lives. The work of our lives is to constantly be asking ourselves, right? And this is a good thing. It's a beautiful thing. The world was created, Hashem created the world for the beauty of us coming close to Him. It's what we want. Even if we don't know we want it, it's what we want. We want to come close to Kadosh Baruch Hu. So that's, I don't know if that answered your question in a nutshell, but that's the general framework, right? Tohu vavohu v'choshech. Hashem created the world with darkness and chaos. Vayomer Elokim yihur vayihur. We are always asking HaKadosh Baruch Hu to show us the light, right? Is this about me, or is it about HaKadosh Baruch Hu, right?
So let's say Jeremiah, who's very unpleasant to be around, was trying to save the Jewish people.
Okay, I'm so sorry. I'm gonna stop here because we can't go into Yirmiyahu now. I have one more point. We only have 5 more minutes, but certainly afterward, I am here and I am happy to answer or questions and talk more about that. Okay, so I'm so sorry. I want to just thank you though for your tremendous questions. Thank you. So we don't have enough time to go into the text itself here with 5 more minutes, but the question, now that we have, we've perhaps, I hope, gained a greater understanding of what we'll call them the sin narratives at the beginning of the Torah are meant to teach us, to awaken within us, to serve, to help us understand how this world is created and how it works, how Hashem created it. I will just put out a question here, and that is, how do we do it? In a nutshell, how do we extricate ourselves if we are struggling with these spiritual defects? How do we protect ourselves from their constant pull and keep the Yetzer Hara at bay? And I will say here, we will always be battling our Yetzer Hara. Hashem created us with the Yetzer Hara. He wants us to deal with the Yetzer Hara. He wants us to try to overcome the Yetzer Hara. That's part of life, right? Chashcha v'hadar nahora, darkness and only afterward light. That's part of that as well, right? And to answer this question, I wanted to share an additional thought from another Torah of the Slonim Rebbe in a different essay, but we don't have time to go into it in depth. But it's a beautiful idea that I'll just share with you here, and that is the eternal ark. In other words, in the story of Noah, right, the world, society had become completely corrupted, as did the actual land and the creatures, and Hashem had to do a restart. He destroyed everything because it was so corrupt, there was no tikkun. But there was one thing that saved humanity from that storm, and that, of course, was the ark. Aseh lecha teva. And so the Slonim here says a beautiful thing. He says that in addition to the limud from Parshat Mabul, right? We learn from the story of the flood to what extent corruption can lead, to the extent that it can completely destroy the entire world. It's so important. And he says here, and we learn from the story of the ark that Adam choteh b'chadrei chadarim ve'ezo shchitut v'tumah hu machnis b'chol habriya. We learn from the story of the ark that a person can sin in chadrei chadarim, behind closed doors. And look at where it leads to. Look at the shchitut, the corruption, the destruction, the impurity that it can ultimately bring into creation, even though you think nobody knows about it, right? Talking about sexual depravity, etc., right? But he says, "Yachad im zeh moreh otanu haTorah kedusha et hatikun lamatzav kazeh." But along with this, Hashem shows us what is the tikkun for a situation, when you are in a situation, a spiritual situation of the dor hamabul, right? When we are sunk in those kinds of struggles, spiritual struggles, darkness, etc., the answer is the ark. Aseh lecha teva. Make you an ark. And I will just sum up here, and we can't go into it in detail, but a beautiful idea that he says that Hashem has given us eternal arks, corners of purity, safe havens to help us weather the storm and stave off the flood. And we will just run through these. One of those, of course, is Shabbat. Shabbat is a teva in time. It is an ark in time, right? We know it. It is, the flooding and the world around us. And it is a beautiful pinah, a beautiful place that preserves us spiritually, protects us spiritually, brings us back connected to Hashem. The first ark is Shabbat. The second ark is Torah learning, right? Torah learning is a teva, is an ark that we can go to. And when we immerse ourselves in Torah learning, we provide ourselves with protection and connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, a beautiful ark, Torah learning. The third, he says, is achdut, connecting to other people. So important. Community is our ark. Being connected to a Jewish community protects us, helps us to stay afloat. Some of you may know, I went through a bout of breast cancer 1.5 years ago, and without achdut, without the community around me, it kept me afloat. It kept my family afloat. And we know that this is relevant in so many ways. It's why the Hasidim stress so much achdut and coming together for brainin, as you see the picture here, etc. We know how important it is to be connected to others who are like-minded, how much chizuk it gives us. And that's also why we learn together. We take classes together. It gives us chizuk in our own spiritual growth, right? Achdut, coming together. How important it is, especially during this time of Corona. And finally, the last teva is knowing that we have a spark of HaKadosh Baruch Hu within us. We are never gone, completely gone, ever. We have a spark of HaKadosh Baruch Hu within us. We are ma'aminim, b'nei ma'aminim. We're the children of Avraham Avinu. Never give up on yourself. Never think that you are too far gone to connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You have that spark of Hashem within you. That is an ark. That is a teva. So these are our tevot Noach. These are our arks: Shabbat, Torah, Achdut, and the spark within us. And I will end by saying that throughout our lives, and especially during this tumultuous time of Corona, it's crucial that we not give in to despair, not in terms of the illness itself, of the Corona itself, and especially not in terms of our potential for spiritual growth. Hashem is speaking to us, and it's time for us to climb into the arcs that Hashem has given us and banish the darkness of kina, tava, and kavod from our lives. We need to appreciate and engage with Shabbat, delve into Torah study, strengthen our mitzvah observance, reach out to family and friends, and work on our Ahavat Yisrael, believe in our own kochot to grow. I hope that our learning today can give us hopefully motivation to grow, and Bezrat Hashem, I'm now open to questions, but we might have to get off because of the next class, and Melissa can tell us.
Here's the deal. First of all, thank you for an amazing, inspiring shir. You're welcome to take questions. I'm gonna, I'll leave this open. You're here at the next shir starts at 10:20. So anyone who's staying for that shir can stay on this link. Anyone who wants to stay and listen to Dodi's question and answer session for a couple of minutes,
Okay.
Stay, we're great. So you've got about 10 minutes to take questions.
Okay, great.
Yeah, so at 10:20, Nava will be on. So ask away, people. I'm
Okay,
stopping recording now.
so I'm here now. I didn't know that we have this time.